France sees Mali as a place where you get your uranium, your nuclear power, and they get it almost for a song. For so little, we now have the statistics that they were getting it for a song. And the instability continues because the Tuaregs are complaining that they are marginalized. And that marginalization, they claim, is in the face of the resources that the Mali government in Bamako is receiving through the sale of these very strategic minerals. And we see, therefore, that after Konaré has handed over to Mani Touré and their coup, Sanogo, and then ultimately Keita, and in the year 2012, there is almost a breakdown of Mali.
Some say Mali is fighting terrorists. But what if that's only part of the story? What if behind the gunfire, behind the chaos, there's a much bigger battle? A battle for Africa's wealth, a battle for Africa's freedom, a battle for Africa's future. After the recent coordinated attacks in Mali, powerful questions are being asked. And now, PLO Lumumba is daring to answer them. Before we continue, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel and listen closely, because Africa's future may depend on understanding this moment. Now, listen. Listen to PLO Lumumba as he reveals the hidden forces, the foreign interests, and the dangerous games being played in the Sahel.
France sees Mali as a place where you get your uranium, your nuclear power, and they get it almost for a song. For so little, we now have the statistics that they were getting it for a song. And the instability continues because the Tuaregs are complaining that they are marginalized. And that marginalization, they claim, is in the face of the resources that the Mali government in Bamako is receiving through the sale of these very strategic minerals. And we see, therefore, that after Konaré has handed over to Mani Touré and their coup, Sanogo, and then ultimately Keita, and in the year 2012, there is almost a breakdown of Mali. Breakdown in the sense that the Tuaregs actually announced a new republic, the Republic of Azawad. And that new Republic of Azawad, they claim that is something that they had thought about in the early 1900s, and they say they are not a part of Mali as is constituted. So strong was it that the French actually had to intervene, the Operation Barkhane, and they deployed almost 5,000 elite troops. And once they did that, MONUSCO was deployed by the United Nations in Mali, and it was stopped. But they did not kill the spirit of the Tuaregs. And what then begins to happen is that Algeria, because Algeria is also a very important player in this regard, Algeria comes out and say, we are in the neighborhood, we are the negotiators, and there is what is called the Algiers Accord. And the Algiers Accord is that they are encouraging the Bamako government to ensure that power is decentralized as one of the means of diffusing these secessionist tendencies. But that does not happen as is expected. So that when Abubakar Keita ultimately comes in the year 2000 and after the year 2013, Mali becomes very unstable. And that instability is what leads to the Assimi Goita coup in the year 2020. And there is a new wave in the Sahel, and that new wave is that France is spurred rather by the fact that France is controlling the economies of countries in that region. Countries to mean Mali itself, Burkina Faso and Niger and Guinea. The CFA franc is still the currency. The central bank of Mali, like all others in that region, is essentially in Paris. Their minerals are being depleted. So this resentment is what then precipitates the crisis that we see now. And when Assimi Goita gets into power in the year 2020, we see a wave of other coups. We see a wave of a coup in Niger, a coup in Burkina Faso, which is reminiscent of the 1983 coup of Thomas Sankara. And what they do is to say, we want to cut the umbilical cord with France. We don't want our resources to be utilized by the French. And at that time, what is now known as the African Corps, the Wagner Group, which is the Russian Wagner Group, is already present in the Sahel. And when they cut the ties with France, you can see the emergence of the Wagner Group, now the African Corps, coming into the fore. And I think and those who know don't just think like I say I'm thinking. They actually say France is behind this. That France are using the Tuaregs as fifth columnists. They are using the Arabs, and they are emphasizing sometimes legitimate demand. They are saying you are marginalized anyway. Number two, you are different anyway. You are Berbers and Arabs. Down south, they are essentially Negroids, and therefore you ought to create your own state. And you can see that what happened in the month of April, the year 2026, when there was this coordinated attack on Bamako and different towns in Mali, leading to the death of the defense minister. It is very targeted. It must also be understood in the context of what is a contestation for power, because they see the emergence of the African Corps and they see the presence of Russia there. And in the context of a country that is losing traction with her former colonies, Mali is a choice property. It is choice because it has strategic minerals. And you've lost Mali, you've lost Niger, you've lost Burkina Faso, and they are saying that we have even moved out of ECOWAS. We are forming the Organization of Sahelian States. They have formed their own military pact. They are moving out of the CFA franc. They are saying we want to have our own banks which are local. We want to have, if it is the Russians, come to Mali and purify whatever it is that we have as minerals in situ. So that combination of factors is what, in my submission, has led to the situation that we see now. And I think that in the eyes of France, which is a power losing its foothold, an unstable Mali is useful. A divided Mali is useful. So the reignition, if you may, of the appetite for the Azawad state is one in which I see the invisible, some may say not so invisible, hands of France. The jury is still out, because we are talking at a time when there is confusion in that area. The defense minister, who was thought to have been very pro-African Corps and therefore pro-Russia, was killed in this very coordinated strike, which tells you that the Tuaregs had intelligence. And that kind of intelligence must have been shared with a power that has interest and has the technological ability to determine where these installations are, where key personalities are. One is waiting to see what will happen as things pan out. You know, there are different arguments about the role of the Africa Corps. It is not a fighting force. It is not designed to interfere in what one may describe as the internal affairs of the country. But there are a number of players. Look, one, Algeria made the claim that they were neutral. and that they are the mediators because they understand the situation. But the question is, when we talk about France leaving, did they actually leave? The question is, they did not, because they are in the neighborhood. They are in La Côte d'Ivoire, they are in Cameroon, they are in Benin, they are in Gabon. So their leaving is one which is meant to hoodwink those who do not appreciate the dynamics. Remember, this is a country with sufficient technology to spy on Mali, and I think that that is what is happening. And you can see that even the Algerian involvement, there are those who say that Algeria is actually a beachhead for what is being manufactured in Paris. Whether that is true or not is another debate, but one can never discount, because France is a very persistent power, one that is losing its hold. And to whom is it losing in their estimation? To the Russian Federation. And what are they scared of? That the Russian Federation, which is a nuclear power in its own right, is having this unlimited access to uranium. And we are not just talking about uranium. There are other strategic minerals. Remember, we are on the 4th and 5th industrial revolution, and we are in the era of artificial intelligence. And the Sahel is an area that is home to many of these minerals. So many commentators don't want to say it very loudly, but in the privacy of boardrooms, they say it rather loudly, that they think that the French are behind what is happening, that the Tuaregs' legitimate demands, if they are simply being used as an excuse and a reason at once. And that is why you see the Assimi Goita administration has been very pointed in saying this is an attempt by the Paris government to come back so that they can install an administration that will do their bidding. And I am of the view that that involvement or those accusations will become the subject of debate for the foreseeable future, and it will be unraveled. But there is the specific question: why couldn't the African Corps operate as if it were a fighting force? I think that is not their mandate. And you don't want, as a foreign force, to enter into an environment, into a terrain, and their involvement, in my view, is at the technical training level, so that those who know the terrain, those who understand the situation, are able to understand. And you can see the rhetoric from the Western world and Western media. They are describing the African Corps as Russian mercenaries, which is very deliberate. The choice of words is very deliberate. Now, these are soldiers of fortune. So when you are already being labeled in that manner, you want to be very careful. Remember the age-old saying, give a dog a bad name and kill it. That, I think, is what is happening. The Sahel, or the Sahelian states, have now formed an alliance, including something that is very close to a military pact. That is Niger, Mali, and Burkina. And remember, if you look at what is happening in that region, there have been attempts, coup attempts in Burkina, assassination attempts in Burkina, attempts at eliminating the government of Assimi in Niger. And once you have instability in Mali, then you are also telegraphing ideas to the individuals who may be used by France and other interested parties in Burkina and also in Niger. And in the neighborhood, it is also the possibility that there are neighbors in that particular region who are not happy with the fact that the Sahel is teaching their military people bad manners. I've had this conversation, and bad manners means that they may choose to use extraordinary means to change government. And particularly when there is dissatisfaction, when the economies are not doing well, then it is something that can be very worrying. And that is why there is the attempt in the Sahel region for them to coordinate their affairs to have defense pacts. And the African Corps from Russia is being used. They are quite present, as you know, in Burkina, and the presence also in Central African Republic. They are becoming the people to go to in order to protect yourself against the machinations of the French and other players in the region. There is a sense in which there is some kind of mini scramble in that region. And the Sahel, remember also that they are out of ECOWAS. Remember that they have also been suspended from the African Union, so that they have been ostracized, and in that state of ostracism, then they are becoming reliant on powers that are prepared to help them and protect them and give them security, because in the neighborhood there is hostility. And as we know, the French are very present in their colonies, which are former colonies in that area, and quite a presence, we already know, in La Côte d'Ivoire particularly, and in Cameroon. So the fears are legitimate that if what happened is allowed to gain root, then it would send some message which would destabilize both Burkina and Niger. You know, I know that there have been attempts in that particular region, attempts by, for example, the president of Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama, to talk to the administrations in the Sahel region. And ECOWAS must then have negotiators who can go out there and tell Mali, tell Burkina, tell Niger, we understand the circumstances that legitimized or necessitated what happened, which under the Malabo principle is considered to be an unconstitutional change of government, and we want you to come in. What we want is that you give us a timetable or how you are going to restore a civilian government. But you see, this civilian restoration of civilian government is something that even the populations in some of these countries, and I've been to Bamako, I've been to Niamey, I've been to Ouaga, and you can see that the people are actually protective of those administrations, because they have had bad experience with elections which are rigged and which they think are manipulated by external forces. So those who are going into negotiation in the Sahel region must be individuals who understand and are sensitive to the realities. And African Union, in my view, should be more involved. ECOWAS should be involved, but remember that the Sahelian regions are also very suspicious of ECOWAS. But I believe that with the new thinking and new people in the bloc, as it were, John Dramani Mahama, particularly in Ghana, has been receiving quite some favorable reception whenever he has visited the Sahel region. And it is important to do so, because if it is not done, there are also non-state actors. ISIS and all of these groups which have been active, which are not answerable to anybody, can be very dangerous and can create an environment where you do not know who to negotiate with. And you saw that when they invaded, if you may, Bamako and other places in Mali, they were making claims that this is a coordinated arrangement that has been achieved by the Islamic State. And some of the actors may be people who are operating in places such as Syria. They have now come to that particular area. Some individuals who are active in Afghanistan, and mercenaries are being hired from as far as Mauritania to be in that space. So it's a fairly complex situation, and one would imagine that this is the time that the African Union can go beyond issuing pro forma statements and engage in very aggressive diplomacy with clear timetable and have all the players involved in a positive manner. Algeria has been playing a role, and Algeria must now have the confidence restored in them, because as it is now, the Assimi Goita government takes the view that Algeria is no longer neutral. They take the view that in fact Algeria is taking sides with the Tuaregs and the Arabs in the northern part of Mali, that they may even support the Azawad Republic. That, I think, is something that the Algiers administration must come out and make it very clear in the context of ECOWAS and in the context of the African Union, that what they want is peace in that area. You cannot afford to have conflict in that area when you have a Sudan that is already at war, when you have a Libya which does not have a strong central government. You cannot afford that luxury, because the danger is it can only become a monster that can consume many states in the region. You know, this idea of having new states, secession, you remember in 1964 in Cairo, when Africa came up with the doctrine of inviolability of inherited boundaries, the idea was that if you begin to allow countries to be created, then there would be no end. Of course, we know that it happened in the case of South Sudan. We know that it happened in the case of Eritrea. And those who want territorial integrity are simply saying, let federation work. Let confederation work, so that you have territories which run pretty much of their affairs, so that the central government in Bamako will have control over foreign affairs and defense. And there are different models which I believe can be deployed if the parties are interested in having their grievances sorted out. Because some of these allegations may be legitimate, but governance is what must be looked at, and it must be governance that allows people to participate, that allows people to realize their potential and do so in a manner that is consistent with the sovereignty of the nations. And this is critical. When we talk about borderless Africa, when we talk about an Africa that is going to trade within itself, then governance must be re-examined. And I hold the view that those are the kind of negotiations and discussions that people must have the courage to engage in. And if they do, they'll discover that it can be done. I remember before the separation of South Sudan and Sudan, John Garang de Mabur said, make unity attractive. Once you make unity attractive, then we will not want to secede. We'll want to be part of a bigger thing. But let us control our affairs. Let us also be part of the baking and the eating of the cake. We are tired of seeing the cake being baked jointly and being eaten by only a few. I think that is, metaphorically speaking, the desirable situation. Easier said than done sometimes, but what is easy? Peace is not an easy thing to secure. You know, when you support a separatist organization, you may deny it all you want, but the reality is that you are enabling these other supporters. You will be enabling ISIS. You'll be enabling the Islamic State. But the diplomatic position is that France will say, we never support terrorist organization. We can never support terrorist organization. They say, you remember, in fact, in the year 2012 and 2013, it is us who came and rescued the Bamako government. That is the diplomatic aspect of it. That is the rhetoric that will go out. But the reality is, if you are aiding or enabling a separatist administration, then whether you like it or not, you are empowering all who are fighting on their side. You may debate all you want, but the reality on the ground will speak against you, because it is either you reject that approach or you support it. And in matters such as this, to be neutral is to support the undesirable. And I think that France will have a very difficult time to extricate itself from some of these accusations that are coming out of Bamako from the Assimi Goita administration, because they have certain intelligence that we who are commentators from outside or observers from outside do not understand and appreciate. And when a country says that we have left, you can leave physically, but within the ranks of the people who have remained, remember that many of these individuals, some of whom continue to serve in the Mali army, were trained in France. And they are loyal to certain things which are French. And these are sometimes sleeper agents which can be animated into action. And history is replete with such individuals over the years. So I think that there ought to be clarity. And one of the things that worry me, when African institutions are not present, they only issue statement and they allow external players, then they create an environment that enables players. You complain about ISIS, you complain about the Islamic Republic, you complain about Boko Haram, but you are creating an environment that enables them to thrive. It is like Dracula. You are giving it blood, and when they drink blood, they become more energized. And whether you like it or not, you are aiding the monster. And I think that that is the situation in which France finds herself at this time. You know, without accusing anybody, we know that the European Union and many European powers engage in doublespeak. For the media, and when you say that we are the leaders of the free world, of the civilized world, of Western civilization, they say the right things. But what happens in a subterranean way, underground, is totally different. I listened, for example, to the discussion that took place early in the year at the Munich Peace Conference, and how Western powers were talking about protecting Western civilization. And in saying so, they were saying we are prepared to do anything that is necessary. It is neo-Machiavellianism. The end justifies the means. And this is how, for example, I understand the fact that European Union speaks as European Union. Then you see each one of the countries now holding talks. In the month of May, on the 11th and 12th days of May, France will be meeting France-Afrique in Nairobi, Kenya, as France. We see Italy doing the same thing, so that even when the claim is made to the contrary, the reality is that the erstwhile colonizers, in a very neo-colonial way, still want to control. They still want to outmaneuver and outperform their other competitors, and the playing ground is still, unfortunately, the continent of Africa. And in this regard, one may ask, where do these fellows get their weapons? And we have seen in the recent past that some of these weapons are traced even to Western countries. So that tells you that sometimes, in order to enable some of these organizations, of course, arms will not be sold directly, but they are third parties, and they just look the other way and allow things to happen. We are allowed to speculate. We are allowed to imagine, because we have seen this too many times. We have seen denials too many times, and we have seen that what was denied is what was happening. And until the evidence is provided to the contrary, allow us to believe that the colonizer never leaves, the DNA never changes, the modus operandi may change, but the ultimate goal is to control, to annihilate, and in this regard, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. When one says that all the members of the European Union are equal, that is not true. That is a lie. That is the theory of it. That is the textbook position. The reality on the ground is that there is very intense competition. And in the absence of the United Kingdom after Brexit, France wants to be, if you allow me, the major domo. We are equal, but some are more equal than the others. Remember that we have a sphere of influence. We have our former colonies. That is what France-Afrique is all about. But we are not stopping there. We are also raiding other countries. You can see France has been entering into pacts with non-former colonies, and they are trying to get them into the fold of France. And this is a combination of what I call soft power and hard power. You see a lot of French companies, Total Energies, Rubies in the retail sector, in the mining sector, very present in the continent of Africa. So there is a competition. Within the European Union itself, there is tension. And in the unguarded moments, you see the French president simply behaving as if, yes, I'm the one, I'm the big kahuna, as the Americans would say. So I am one who is very quick to separate theory and practice. And the practice is quite clear, that France wants to be in the same league as the Russian Federation, in the same league if they can, like the United States of America, so that they are speaking at that level. They may pretend to be humble and polite, but they are packing a punch behind it. That is France for you. And its appetite to appear bigger than the others is so self-evident that it cannot be camouflaged nor hidden. To understand France, particularly its modus operandi in the continent of Africa and even elsewhere, you've got to understand the manner in which it conducted and practiced its colonization. In the French colonization, they actually tried to make their colonies part of France. Territoire de haute mer. These are our external territories which are being controlled from Paris. In school parades, black children were persuaded to sing songs saying, our ancestors, the Gauls. And they had a word in French called évoluer. Évoluer means the evolved one, that if you are an African and you are now taught well, you started speaking French well, you married a French lady, then you are evolved, you are modern. So in their mind, the independence was not meant to move you away from France. This is why they have CFA franc. This is why the monies and the currency of some of their former colonies are still held in Paris. This is why their language is being promoted for that reason. And I think it is the former French president Jacques Chirac who once said that if the African colonies of France were to run away from being controlled by the French, France would become a third world. That was Jacques Chirac. That tells you how important these territories are. So they want to be the invisible hand that controls everything that happens on the ground. You may have something that looks like an election. You may have Africans, black faces as your presidents, as your ministers, but the real decisions are made in Paris. You may have a currency that bears the face of your president or your freedom fighters, but it doesn't matter. You are territory of France. When you understand it in that way, you can then appreciate how sometimes they behave in the manner that they do. Difficult to understand, but that is what I call the political pathology of France, that they think that this is part of France and must behave like part of France. And if you don't behave, we'll beat you into order. And you will see that in all their former colonies, until very recently, they would station elite forces, so that if there is any attempt at a coup, the elite forces would neutralize the attempt at coups. They were there in all the Sahelian Republic. They were there in Senegal. They were there. Perhaps they are still there in La Côte d'Ivoire. You'll find them in Benin. You'll find them in Gabon. You'll find them in Cameroon. You'll find them in Mayotte. And this is because they think that this is French territory. And that psychology is very difficult to deal with. And even these meetings that are being held, la francophonie, Francafrique, they may use diplomatic language to say this is a meeting of equals. But that is like the mosquito telling the elephant, or the elephant telling the mosquito, we are in a meeting of equals. Sounds nice, but the visuals tell you a different story. Mali and the Assimi Goita administration must move very quickly to consolidate the position that they are taken in the following context. I think it is important that Mali coordinates her activities within Sahel, with Niger and Burkina Faso, in order to protect themselves in the short term, so that they are not overwhelmed by these separatist forces. Number two, it is important that Mali addresses the internal problems. It is important that an all-Mali meeting be held with all the players, with the Tuaregs, with the Arabs in the north, and it is important, in my view, that the Algiers Declaration is revisited within the context and under the supervision of the African Union. And if that is done, then it would be very useful because it would then create a timetable of writing a new constitution. It was having a new system of governance and also diffusing these forces which are becoming stronger and stronger. And one of the things that is now very clear from experience from other countries, that if you don't take care of these insurgencies very quickly, then they begin to multiply, and violence and conflicts becomes an industry. And when it becomes an industry, then you'll find that governments only control the capital, but the rest of the territory is controlled by others. And that is quite possible because there are numerous players in Mali who would want to have control of the uranium mines. So the call is coordinate within Sahel. The call is involve the African Union. The call is, it is a matter of urgency, because matters such as these are not won militarily. Ultimately, there must be diplomacy that puts a stop to the conflict.
Personally, I think what we are witnessing in Mali is bigger than one country. It is a battle for freedom, for dignity, for control over Africa's future. Mali is standing at the center of a storm, facing terrorism, foreign interference, and the painful legacy of colonial control. Yet, despite the pressure, the people of Mali continue to resist. PLO Lumumba's message is powerful because it forces us to ask hard questions. Who truly benefits when African nations remain unstable? Why do some foreign powers seem uncomfortable when African countries choose their own path? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. At African Spotlight, we believe Africa must tell its own story. The continent is rising, and every African deserves to understand the forces shaping our future. Mali's struggle is a reminder that freedom is never given freely. It must be defended with courage, with wisdom, and with unity. What happens in Mali today could shape the future of the entire Sahel tomorrow. That is why this conversation matters so much. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Africa is finally breaking free from foreign control? If you believe in an Africa that is strong, independent, and united, then this is your home. Subscribe to African Spotlight, turn on the notification bell, and join us as we bring you the stories, the truths, and the voices shaping Africa's future. Until next time, Africa must rise, and Africans must lead.